Hi everyone, welcome to the Creative Woman, or welcome back. And today I have a viewer request for Chiron, and so I'm going to read first Chiron in the first house or in Aries. Right, and I want to thank you, viewer. You know who you are, who requested this, because you are not only helping yourself, but you are helping everyone who has Chiron in the first house or in Aries. Okay, so, all right, and then I'm going to make a separate video for viewer, you know who you are, who requested this, for Chiron in the fourth house or in Cancer. So again, that will be a separate video. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to read this, and then I will also, anything comes intuitively to me, I will also say that if necessary. I'm just going to take that out. I don't need that. Okay, so Chiron in Aries and or the first house. The first house in Aries brings the basic feeling, I exist. The desire to emerge into life with conquest, self-assertion, and initiative. The I am, the inner sense of beingness and primary identity, also belong to this house. The physical appearance is said to be described as the ascendant and is often used as help rectify unknown birth times. With Chiron in Aries, or the first house, we find a wound in this area, often a deeply buried one. After all, if you feel you have no right to exist, then self-assertion and initiative may be accompanied by the fear of non-being. Therefore, with this placement, we may unconsciously feel that we only exist as a mirror to someone else. And that also echoes the opposition house of the first house, which is the seventh house. We only feel motivated to champion a cause on someone else's behalf, like a knight in shining armor, but with no will of our own. Grandiose displays of bravado and fighting spirit compensate for the pain, self-doubt, and fear underneath, which could drive us into a repeating cycle of futile and self-destructive endeavors. We tend to take action prematurely, translating emotional tension immediately into action. With this Chiron placement, we may wound ourselves with a militant self-sufficiency, becoming unable to ask for help and support in our conviction that we must, quote, go it alone. Underneath, however, there may be despair and an identification with non-being, a, quote, death wish, and a deep fear of doing anything that truly expresses what we want. Either we do not know what this is, or we conceal it for fear it will be taken away, spoiled, or destroyed. One person with Chiron in the first house said, quote, where there ought to be a sense of me, there is an enormous hole and a pain beyond my ability to endure it, unquote. With Chiron in the first house or Aries, our spontaneous expressions of passion, being, or will may have been crushed in childhood, either subtly or overtly, with stock phrases such as, quote, I want never gets, unquote. Or, here's another quote, children should be seen and not heard. repressive child rearing methods such as schedule feeding, lack of physical holding and mirroring, and premature systematic toilet training often accompany the early wounds of this placement. Okay, and I want to say too, any of these things that you viewers are seeing as true for yourself that I'm reading about your parents doing some of these things, again, you want to keep in mind that this is in your astrological natal chart. So you are actually, because of having Chiron in Aries or the first house, this is actually what you're going to experience, these injuries. So whoever it's coming from, if it's coming from the outside in, from a parent or a grandparent or whatever, just know that not to blame them, because here it is right here. This is what you were to experience this, so that you can, after you experience, because we all are going to experience the injury first, because that's what Chiron is the wounded healer. So you're going to be wounded first, so that then through those experiences you can heal. You can heal yourself. You can be healed. Okay. So again, please do your best not to blame anyone. Okay. Okay, so let's see. If the interference with and rejection of our natural rhythms are serious enough, they result in deep confusion and the belief that what we want, indeed who we are, is not acceptable, and that we must not reach out to satisfy our desires. A paralysis of the will follows, and understandably, a deep, often misplaced rage lies underneath. Okay, I'm going to read that again. That is absolutely true. So you are going to automatically come in with what this just said, a paralysis of the will follows, and understandably, a deep, misplaced rage lies underneath. Because this is coming to you. These were the energies that were given to you when you were being birthed. So you're going to have rage about something, but it's not going to be correct. You're probably going to blame your parents or your grandparents. And now you can know that it's deeper than that. Here's where it comes from, Chiron. Okay. Later on in life, we may feel that we must conceal what we truly want, or it will be destroyed by outside forces. Hence, we find ourselves instead getting exactly what we do not want. And again, also, don't feel guilty if you have blame, because you probably have. You didn't know any better, but now you do. And so you can let go also of the guilt, because you're going to feel guilty with this awareness. But you're not guilty either, again, because you didn't know. You didn't know. Owning up to what we do want might initially create panic because it touches our wounded area. Sometimes the early environment of those with Chiron in the first house or Aries is hostile and full of suppressed or overt aggression, which compounds feelings of timidity and lack of self-worth and personal rights. Then survival becomes equated with learning how to please and placate others, which is, again, that comes from the south, the seventh house opposition to the first house. One woman expressed this as a capacity to fill the holes in other people or situations and stay anonymous herself. Being seen was too dangerous. Conversely, we find individuals with this placement who struggle until their will is so inflated that they appear as virtual personifications of will, drive, energy, and enthusiasm. A rugged, pioneering quality sometimes characterizes this Chiron placement. Albert Schweitzer, doctor, pioneer, and missionary, had this placement, and so did Jan, I think her last name is Smuts, who led the Boer guerrillas against the British and rose to being Prime Minister of South Africa. Margaret Thatcher, the present Prime Minister of Britain, has Chiron and Aries in the 6th house of work. The 6th house is the house of work and service. Okay, let's see here. However, sometimes this powerful energy is fragile like a bubble. When it bursts, the person may deflate into a sorry mess of pain and insecurity and even wish for death. Relationships where dependence and independence issues arise has again the echo of the 7th house, which is the opposite house of the 1st house. Frequently cause this, as do situations which create a feeling of impotence. With Chiron in Aries or the 1st house, we may be prone to suicidal fantasies or feelings. Sometimes these are a response to anger, frustration, or not being in control of a situation. They may be a wish to regain some sense of power or a reaction to not being able to get our own way. With this placement, a willful adolescent who brooks no interference with his or her omnipotence often lives side by side with an uncomfortable timidity, vulnerability, and awareness of the ephemeral nature of a physical life. Ephemeral nature of physical life. One person with this placement described herself as living with an acute awareness that when she died, there would be nothing left, no trace. She would depart like a will-o'-the-wisp. If Chiron is conjunct the ascendant, beginnings may be difficult. Okay, so Chiron being conjunct, I would say, being in the 1st house, of course, you want to check and see the degrees. So if it's within 7 degrees of your ascendant, then this will pertain to you. If Chiron is conjunct the ascendant, beginnings may be difficult. We either rush into starting something or we hesitate, even get ill, rather than make decisions. We may collapse at the threshold of what seems to be an exciting new phase of life. Behind this, we find the experience of physical birth is often particularly significant or traumatic. From then on, every birth, every beginning of a new life cycle may be fraught with fear, resistance, and tumult. The nature of this struggle is frequently described by the sign in which Chiron and or the ascendant are placed and the aspects to them. So yes, you want to see if you have any aspecting planets to your Chiron, either by house or sign, which in turn usually express characteristics of the physical birth. Some examples will make the point clear. A man with Chiron in the 1st house in Pisces would retreat into confusion, space out, and sometimes drink too much whenever he approached a new phase of life and had decisions or initiatives to take. His mother was anesthetized during his birth. He described himself as likewise feeling anesthetized. numb, confused, unable either to think clearly or know what he was feeling. A woman with Chiron conjunct the ascendant in Aquarius always consulted an astrologer or medium before making decisions, as she was terrified of getting it wrong. She concealed this fear by never consulting the same person twice, contemptuously dismissing the various readings as useless. When I innocently asked her if she had ever seen an astrologer before, she confessed the issue. She was ready to talk about it and did so at length. This enabled her to begin to face and contain the real feelings which were underneath. She had been, quote, making them wrong, unquote, as a defense against the terrifying feeling of not having a right to exist and being fundamentally, quote, wrong herself. These were the emotional conclusions she reached shortly after her birth. Her mother initially rejected her and did not want to feed her as she had wanted a son. With Chiron in Aquarius, we are quite capable of rejecting people who do not fit the bill, and this is reminiscent of Chiron's rejection by his mother. A person with Chiron in the first house, and with a Scorpio ascendant, these are all examples, so it might not exactly have your same experiences, but for someone it might. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this. A person with Chiron in the first house with a Scorpio ascendant squared by 10th house Pluto provides a second example. This person nearly died in birth and was pulled out by forceps. She later connected her lack of willpower with having been, quote, twice defeated during birth. First, when she was struggling to get out and couldn't. Second, when she had given up, was dying, and was then pulled out against her will. Her basic attitude to life was one of defiance and determination to defeat it by refusing to cooperate. Underneath was a profound death wish, which, once faced, began a remarkable transformation. Any first house planet, especially if near the ascendant, represents a strong archetypal energy encountered early in life, which often develops into a pseudo-identity that must be shed in the search for our true inner nature. In extreme cases, planets conjunct the ascendant seem to possess the person, and that's in quotes, if his or her ego is weak. With Chiron present, there may then be an identification with the wounded healer. Eve Jackson's research found that indeed this is a common placement for healers and therapists. Very early in life, even in the womb or during birth, a person can take on the role of the healer as regards his family and friends, and this continues throughout life, perhaps even becoming a career. It is frequently a way of concealing a deep feeling of woundedness, similar to the well-known pattern of, and this is another quote, identifying with the aggressor, unquote. With this Chiron placement, we may take our sense of identity from others, pouring ourselves into their mold, taking on their allegiances, ideals, thoughts, and even feelings. Another echo of, again, the opposite of the first house, the 7th house. As one person put it, I'm just becoming aware of the horror of the fact that I always take my cue from the outside. From other people, and underneath I feel utterly unreal. Previously in his life, he had suffered from an apparent lack of motivation. However, when transiting Chiron squared his sun, he began to realize what was underneath, a feeling that it was not worth doing anything because the person who was doing it was unreal. So anything he did would therefore also be unreal. Sometimes people with Chiron in the first house or in Aries struggle hard to find something they can do, which will bring them the sense of being, the sense of being they lack. They may set themselves well nigh impossible tasks, loaded with all the intensity of a search for confirmation that they exist. Often this is the futile struggle which has to be given up, but this placement is also frequently found in the horoscopes of people who are in fact originators, unique, one-off individuals, perhaps precisely because the inner being has had such a struggle. Jung has Chiron in Aries. His conflict with Freud, a typical seventh house echo, led him to originate a new model of the psyche based on his pioneering exploration of his own inner world. Okay, so with Chiron in the first house or Aries, we may project onto our bodies our inner sense of shame and embarrassment at existing. We may feel mortified by features which others do not even notice, but which to us seem monstrously ugly or misshapen. We might cringe inwardly at our ears, which stick out too much, or our legs, which are too fat. We feel too tall, too short. We feel uncoordinated or awkward, and situations of physical exposure like sport or sex turn into potential nightmares. Cecil Rhodes, who had Chiron in the first house in Capricorn, had a force-shortened finger on one hand, which acutely embarrassed him. Even his aggrandizement of the British Empire could not compensate for this deformity, which he always carefully concealed when being photographed. Okay, let me just check here. Those with Chiron in the first house or Aries have the capacity to enable and empower others, being so aware of their own deep powerlessness in the face of the immensity of the universe. Living close to the edges of existence, they often give the impression of being rather wild and untamable. They are often loners, even if married or in a committed relationship. They may also personify qualities for others. I have met several people with this placement who have spent long, intense years searching for a missing and elusive sense of identity, only to discover that when they gave up the search and accepted their nothingness, an enormous vitality and sense of being followed. The spark of being finally ignited. With this Chiron placement often comes a knack for timing actions intuitively to, quote, grasp the moment. Yours may be a unique combination of compassion and appropriate action, an ability to be highly innovative and to take initiative, especially where the welfare of others is at stake. You gain strength through conquest and fighting difficulties, but you must also learn the lesson of how to be a noble rival to those with whom you compete. If you succeed in treading the narrow path of neither succumbing to passive aggression, nor obliquely acting out destructiveness, you may come to feel the will of life flowing through you. You are not omnipotent, and you don't have to do it all. Whether or not you work in the healing field, you probably have the capacity to act as a catalyst in situations and to touch the inner being of others. Although your wound is your doubt of your own existence, you are probably quite magnetic as a personality. So don't be surprised if others react strongly to you. Okay, that is all I have for that Chiron in the first house, or Aries. Okay, any questions you have, please. And if you just leave me a comment below. And if you would like me to send you the written what I read so that you can have that and reread it, please send me a comment, and I will absolutely, and your email address, and I will send that to you. Okay, thank you for joining me.